Welcome back, everyone. Craig here. So, I wanted to do a more in-depth video on something I've talked about recently on the podcast, and it has to do with, um, let's say, homeowners insurance policy as sort of a generic name, but there's actually different kinds of quote-unquote home policies. And I'm not going to give an exhaustive sort of comparison of the policies, but just sort of give you kind of a big, broad overview of how they work and what you need to be looking for depending on your circumstances. I'll I'll say this probably multiple times in this video, but it is really important that you talk to an actual insurance agent. I'm not a licensed insurance agent. I deal with insurance all the time as an attorney, and I deal with coverage issues and you know questions about what is and isn't covered, policy limits, exclusions, things like that. But in terms of actually picking out the correct policy, that's something that a broker, an actual agent, will probably be better qualified to answer. So with that in mind, um, so anyone, well, and this is, you don't even have to own a home. So if you rent a house or rent an apartment, you're going to have, you're probably going to have renter's insurance, or you should have renter's insurance. If you own a home, especially if you have a mortgage, you're going to have a homeowner's insurance policy because your bank or lender is going to require that. And it's just a good idea. If you have similar to that, it works similar to, let's say, a commercial policy, a CGL policy. So like here at my office, we have a commercial policy. We rent this space. Our landlord is going to have insurance, but we have our own specific commercial liability policy that protects us. If someone comes in and gets hurt while they're here, things like that. They all kind of function in the same way. And then sort of more specific than, let's say, a traditional homeowners policy is what I would say either a country estate policy or an actual farm policy. Most people aren't going to have farm policies, although where I live here, there's a lot of farmers. Most of them are going to have farm policies, um, in part because it affords different kinds of coverage, including, just to give you an example, I believe that most dairy farmers are going to have a specific coverage so that if they introduce a contaminated batch of milk, so the milk truck comes, picks up their milk, and let's say it's contaminated, has let's say antibiotics in it from a treated cow, which you're not allowed to do, and it goes to the creamery, and they have to throw out the whole batch or something. It'll provide liability coverage for the farmer in favor of, let's say, the creamery to cover the cost of the lost milk. So that's kind of one unique thing of a farm policy that, unless you're sort of in dairy, you're not really going to need that. Um, there may also be some crop insurance and animal loss coverage under a farm policy that most of us don't need, even if you have an acreage or something like that. Um, but the way there's really, I would say, two main parts of this kind of type of insurance. There's liability protection and there's property protection. Okay. Let me talk about liability protection first. Liability protection is really the primary purpose of these policies, even though most of us really associate them with property protection. If my house burns down, and there's a tornado, things like that, hail, ruins my roof, things like that, property protection. That's kind of how most of us think of it. And that is an important part of it. But that really isn't the driving purpose of these kinds of policies. It's really about liability. So that, if you own a property in most states, and this will vary by states, as a property owner, you're probably going to have some legal duty to people that come onto your property, whether it's a salesman that stops in or it's your best friend that comes over for dinner. People come onto your property. It typically does not apply to members of your own household. Again, this can vary by state, but if you are out and you trip off the deck because you didn't replace a floorboard, you as the property owner and the policy holder probably won't have insurance coverage under that, because you really can't sue yourself. Um, but really, for anyone else that comes in, anyone that's either invited or you can foresee that they are there, while they're there, you probably have certain duties under the law of the state that you're in, to keep them safe. Um, the old, sort of some of the old cases that are out there, if you've got a pit in your yard, you need to mark it. Like if you've got a big old hole in the yard that someone may not see, you may need to protect them or warn them from it. If you have a dog that bites people, you probably have a duty to keep that dog restrained or warn people. Those kinds of things. Keeping your property safe and up to speed, having handrails on your stairs, replacing rotting wood. Um, if it's in the winter, shoveling the sidewalks, things like that. Those are the kinds of things that can give rise to a legal claim against you as the owner of the property or renter of the property or whatever the case may be. And liability coverage basically says we will step in and defend you. So, number one, under most policies, they're going to provide you with legal counsel at their expense, your insurance company's expense. That saves you going out and having to hire an attorney to defend you. They should pay for your attorney, albeit they'll get to choose who that attorney is. And if there is coverage, um, pay for any damages that are caused by that. Now, there can be exclusions, and this is sort of why it's important to know what kind of insurance you have. For example, a lot of homeowners policies will have exclusions for swimming pools unless they know about it and they give approval, and some simply won't cover people that have swimming pools because of drowning risks and things like that. It's important to know that some homeowners policies won't insure you against dog bites, or they'll say you can have one dog, or you can only have certain breeds of dogs. Like your insurance policy can vary in that respect. But that's kind of the general purpose of the liability portion of your property insurance, is to protect you as the owner if someone should make a claim, whether it has merit or not. It provides you with a legal defense. You got to put them on notice. If someone sues you, you got to let them know, but they'll step in and they'll hire lawyers for you. And if there's coverage, try to pay that off so that you don't have to write out a check yourself. So that's sort of the liability portion of insurance. That's kind of big picture. The second, and the one that we kind of really think about when we think about insurance, is property coverage. Um, having having the ability to fix your house if there's wind damage, or replace it if it burns down. You may have you may have to rent a place while your house is being rebuilt or it's being fumigated after a fire. Kind of rental replacement costs, dumpster costs, things of that nature. If your car is in the garage when the house burns down, it may replace the car up to the fair market value. Your snow blower, your appliances, things like that in your home or attached to your home, generally speaking, will be covered up to a certain level. Um, if there is a loss and the property is covered. Again, this is where it's really important to talk to your insurance agent, because this can vary by state, and it can also vary by insurance company, the type of coverage you have. there can be exceptions to that. A common exclusion is flood loss. So you've probably heard the term floodplain. I'm not a flood insurance expert, but I think what it generally means is most insurance companies will not insure against flood loss. Um, let's say you live up on a hill and you have a landslide, there may be an exclusion for that, and they won't cover flooding unless you live in an actual floodplain. So if you are near a river, but you're not in the floodplain, you probably aren't eligible for flood insurance. And if there's one of these 100-year floods and your house is damaged, there may not be coverage for that. So that if you are anywhere in the vicinity of water, you may want to make sure you know that and find out if you're eligible for insurance from flooding or not. What else? Oh, here's a good example. Fire loss from, let's say, chimney fires or wood stoves. I have a wood heater slash wood cook stove in our house. One of the things that we really looked for when we found insurance was one that would in fact insure us and not charge us a whole bunch more. What we had to do for our insurance is basically have the stove and the chimney installed by at least up to code, and I think even up by a licensed professional. I could install my own chimney. I'm not going to do that. I've done it before. I hired someone, had them come in. At least I know when it was put in by professionals. That is something that I did to give myself maximum coverage in the event that we have a fire because something goes wrong with the wood stove or the chimney. Some insurance companies just won't cover that at all. Um, so that's something really important to keep in mind. The other thing, and the kind of reason that I'm doing this video, is as I talked about this briefly on the podcast, is if you have a fire that burns down an outbuilding of some sort. So if you have sort of your shop, your man cave, whatever, off where you've got your tools, maybe you park a boat or an RV and you got chainsaws, tractors, ATVs, side by sides, things like that. You may want to make sure that you talk about that with your insurance agent because depending on the type of policy you have, if it's not attached to the house itself, the insurance company may not cover those items in that building unless you sort of list them out and they know about it. So they say, okay, here's the Kubota tractor. Here's the 14-foot fishing boat with 10 horse outboard. Here's the let's see, the Kubota zero turn. Whatever the case may be, if you don't specify those things, you may not have coverage for those if they're lost in the fire. They will probably cover the cost of replacing the building, but again, you need to make sure your insurance agent knows what you want. Do you want sort of the value of the building or do you want the replacement cost? But that's sort of how property coverage works. One of the things that you want to keep in mind, especially if you move, let's say you move from a home in the, let's say in town in the city, and you move out to the country. Suddenly you get an ATV and a dog, and you put up a swimming pool. Your homeowner's policy that you had, let's say when you moved out there before you got those things, may not extend to that. Things can change after you've started living there, and most people don't know that they don't have coverage until something happens, and then they find out, oh, by the way, there's an exclusion for swimming pools. So that's just a reminder that it's just a really good idea to schedule an actual visit with your insurance agent at his office, her office, or at home, preferably at your property once a year or just anytime there's a change like that. Most of us, and myself included, don't like to do that because we're afraid they'll see something that raises the rates. That's understandable. But the reason why the rates are going to go up is it may include covering things that are risks to you, either property losses or liability. You at least want to know what my risks are, and maybe you'll decide, you know what, having a swimming pool isn't worth the risk, or let's put a good fence around it to minimize the chance that someone could sneak in and fall in it. Maybe we shouldn't get this type of dog. Maybe we should keep our dog locked up. Things like that. So those are the two main parts of most homeowners, renters, farm policies is liability and property. There's a lot of nuances there between policies and states and whatever. So that's where it's really, really important for you to talk to an insurance agent. Find someone that you trust that has experience in these kinds of things that can give you guidance. There's a lot of information out there on the internet. Um, but just do your homework. If people have questions about that, or things that you like further elaboration on or something like that, feel free to leave a comment below. If it's more of a legal related question, I'd rather you didn't leave a comment and just get on the link tree and send me an email. A little easier for me to respond, and then there's privacy and confidentiality there. So I hope you found this video helpful. I'll be doing some more like this in the future, so I hope you'll stay tuned. If you're not already on my mailing list, I hope you go down below and get on the email list. I send out a newsletter about once a week. Has some helpful tips in there. You can always unsubscribe if you don't like it. So if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, thank you for listening, everyone. And until next time, have a good one.